Hi, welcome to City Paper Live, our new weekly talk show. I'm Lisa Cunningham, the editor, and I'd like to start the show by wishing my mom a very happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mom!
Biggest CP fan out there.
Yeah. With me today is our editorial designer, Abbie Adams.
Hello.
And our photographer and videographer, Jared Wickerham.
How's it going?
So today we're going to talk visual journalism. Abbie is the graphic designer for our editorial department. She's also an illustrator. And Jared is a photographer with a sports photography background. So we got a mix of things to talk about today. Do you want to begin by introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about how you got to where you are? Jared?
Oh, man. Yeah, well, I guess I was a failed skateboarder, essentially, right? A failed athlete. But I ended up here, been at City Paper a little over a year. I worked for Getty Images before that, covering a lot of sports, and and now it's nice to kind of be in one place and cover the community, and every day is so different, so yeah, it's fun.
That's the nice thing about working here. There's never the same thing every week, and you don't really know what you're going to expect. Sometimes things are planned out a couple weeks in advance, and sometimes an issue changes at the last minute because of breaking news, and you have to change your entire schedule. So yeah, it always keeps you on your toes.
Pittsburgh is so small, sometimes it's the same people, but different events. You know, it's, you see a lot of the same faces, but it's never the same thing.
Do you ever go through a day without recognizing somebody at this point?
No, usually not. Sometimes I'll show up to a portrait. I think I went to City Theater on the south side and was doing a portrait, and I ran into 3 other portrait subjects while doing the other one. So, it's impossible not to run into people.
Abbie's also been with us around a year. Before I was editor, I was art director at City Paper for over 10 years, and Abbie is going to soon run into this too, I think. I see people in the street all the time, and I'm not sure if I ever actually met them or if it's just because I saved their photo and photoshopped them. It happens all the time, and it's a little unnerving because sometimes I have started to say something to somebody, and they're like a little confused, not knowing who I am, and I have to say, "Oh, I had your photo zoomed in huge. I was photoshopping something off your crotch," and then it's like, "Oh, Lisa, what are you saying?" So yeah, there's awkward moments there too.
Not that, maybe.
Yeah. Sometimes things just come out. Very regrettable. And then I just shared it here, which is also regrettable. Abbie, tell us how you got here.
Oh man, so I've been at City Paper since last December. When I first moved to Pittsburgh, I was kind of in the arts and community nonprofit world. And then decided to leave and freelance because I was like, if I'm going to do it, Pittsburgh is the place to do it. So I was freelancing and working part-time. And then I guess 2 years ago, we set off and moved to Spain for a year. And while we were there, we were like, actually, Pittsburgh wasn't that bad. So I decided to come back. And when I got back here, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I wanted to keep freelancing.
That's our official slogan. Pittsburgh, it's not that bad.
It really wasn't. And so, yeah.
When you were freelancing, was it design? Was it illustration? Was it both?
It was kind of a mix. My 2 biggest things were actually doing house portraits. I loved architecture and was doing a lot of architectural drawing and illustration. So I would do house portraits for people. So that's kind of what got my name out there. And then I had taken on a handful of nonprofit and small business clients where I was doing branding and more graphic design stuff. So I had that in the mix. And then, when I applied for this job, sort of took on the whole more text heavy based design. So, yeah.
I'll say it's been a huge thrill to have 2 talented people like this on the staff. A lot of media and newspapers around the country are cutting back the art departments, sourcing out even graphic design, getting rid of photography departments. And while I can't afford to hire as many freelancers as other places, I can have 2 full-time staffers and give them health insurance and have their photos and artwork in the issues. Abbie illustrated this week's cover, which is Pittsburgh Fun Facts. We got a lot of,
Can they see it?
yeah, hold it up. We got a lot of, I talked to Visit Pittsburgh and they gave me a lot of info. Abbie also researched online, found a lot of fun facts. This week is our coloring issue. It's our third, and it's always one of the readers' favorites, most picked up issue of the year, one of them. And we have 5 local artists spread throughout with coloring pages. And while we talk, we're gonna color in the issues, and we'll post it on Twitter later for you to see.
You don't want to see mine.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna color Abbie Winkler's Pittsburghized Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter was born here in Pittsburgh. That was one of the fun facts we found. So yeah, we're gonna go.
I'm going to go with Dippy. Well, Dippy in the Skyline.
All right. That's one
it's
of our
easier.
advertisers, which it was really fun. Like, in addition to the local artist, some of our advertisers joined in on the fun. Jared is talking about Dippy the dinosaur on the Carnegie Museum of Natural History's page. And Abbie is taking on her own cover design. So you better not fuck it up, or the artist is gonna be pissed. So Jared, let's talk a little bit about what you did yesterday.
Yeah, so yesterday I spent a few hours kind of in the north side at the Exxon gas station, which unfortunately made news when the owners essentially came behind the plexiglass and were beating up a couple of women.
A video went viral. These 2 black women were grabbed by the hair, were shoved. It was pretty violent and a tough video to watch. I saw a lot of black women in Pittsburgh say that they couldn't even bear to watch the video.
Yeah.
This comes a few days after a report was out that showed that black women in Pittsburgh are. This is like the least healthy city for them to live. More die in childbirth.
Yeah.
It was pretty alarming. So this is something that's really widespread. So they've been protesting outside the Exxon station in Marshall Shadeland since this event happened.
Yeah, they've been out there every day. When I got there, there were about 7 people, but most people were at work. And then by the time I left, there was a full crew of probably 20 or so people.
Jared called me from there, and it was hard to hear him because all I could hear were cars honking over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's because
they were all in support of them being there and protesting and essentially shutting down the gas station. I mean, I've covered a number of protests and things. Just did one last week in Cranberry, and this by far, I've never seen more support, as it should be for something like that. So yeah, it was nonstop. I think the entire time I was there, I think I only heard one negative response, from a white guy driving his big pickup truck through the intersection, and someone made a comment and said, "Well, if that had been a red light, I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have made that comment." So,
what's the most difficult thing about covering something like that?
I think the most important part is just getting to know everybody and who they are and why they're there and why it's important, because
when you show up, you talk to the people you're photographing.
Yeah, I obviously have my cameras with me, but I don't just come in and start taking pictures right away. I think it's important no matter what your assignment is, but especially those kinds of things where a lot of times you don't, I didn't experience that. I've never experienced that, and I'm not a black woman in Pittsburgh, so it's important for me to try and understand it as much as possible, and to get their side of things and learn as much about these people as I can. I mean, it's I was saying yesterday, this is our community too, and so it's really important to get to know these people. Pittsburgh is so small that you're gonna run into everybody over and over again. The woman who was organizing it yesterday, we hadn't formally met, but I had definitely photographed her and run into her at the Antoine Rose protests and that kind of thing. So, these are our neighbors, and it's really important to just get to know these people. But it's the as far as the hard part, I mean, I think it's just gaining the trust of these people sometimes, because
Do you see that other media outlets don't have that same compassion that you do?
I think I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily one media outlet or another. I think there are some journalists, whether it's whether you're talking about other photographers or writers or TV reporters or cameramen, that that maybe just want to kind of come in and work the assignment and be done and leave and go home. And I get, we all have those days, but I think it's, again, I think it's important to not do that. And sometimes, I see people just kind of come in and swoop in and, get what they need from across the street and not have any interactions with anybody, which I think is doing everybody a disservice, to not get the full story and listen to everybody and know who these people are and why they're there. So, I mean, the other week we had a Mac Miller mural that was being put up, and the artist asked everybody who was there covering if they, he insisted essentially that we add something to the mural. Mm-hmm. So Lake Fong from the Post-Gazette and myself.
What did you add?
I added Legends Never Die, which is a lyric of his and kind of a tie-in to Pittsburgh and Roberto Clemente and all this stuff.
And you were a Mac Miller fan, right?
Yeah. So the two videographers put something up too, and everybody was kind of, chatting away, and so that was really nice. But then, there are times where people just kind of sit across the street and don't want to talk to anybody, and I get that. I'm naturally more of an introvert, so I definitely had to learn to be.
Yeah, right.
No, really.
Jared is the friendliest, most talkative guy you'll ever.
Well, I just read an article that said, that was like, these are the traits of an introverted extrovert.
Yeah.
And that's 100% me. So, there are times where I'm happy to talk to people, but I eventually just hit a limit, So I get that, but
Go ahead. Has there ever been a time where you've shown up to an assignment and talked to people and kind of gotten a read of the scene, and you're like, I shouldn't be here, or this should be a private moment, or because I know you're showing up for assignments, and that's part of your job, but has there ever been that time where you've
Yeah, I mean the Antoine Rose protests. Sometimes there were times they would essentially block an intersection, right? And a lot of times they would, have a prayer, or they would just kind of have a little gathering where they regroup and talk, and a lot of times they would ask media to not be in that circle and not be a part of that, which I get for certain reasons. I think it's important to document those sometimes. And I think sometimes it's good to give them their space. So that's always what I tried to do was, it wasn't necessary for me to be in that circle every single time. But when there were a lot of people, or there was something important to photograph in that group, then I would work my way in and be as, understanding of that situation as possible, not trying to get in anybody's way, and kneel down when possible, and just those. I would like to say that those were the obvious things to do, but not everybody always thinks that way.
Once Jared shoots an assignment, he'll turn in a bunch of photos for Abbie and I to choose from. Abbie, can you say what you look for in a thing like a protest or a big group shot? Like, what draws your eye most when you get a big following from Jared?
Yeah, so we all know that people respond to faces, so that's normally what I'm looking for. I'm looking for really great expressions. We're looking to, make sure that the photos that we choose are representative of the people that are there, and so that we have a balance of who's shown in the images. Of course, things about like composition, making the right crop, that sort of thing. But it's usually like I'll be flipping through your photos really, really fast and then find like, 3 to 5 that I'm like, ooh, those are good. Because I think there's also just like, your gut or your eye or whatever can just immediately kind of pick out the ones that are like really, really strong, and then go back and kind of look at those details and then make sure that everybody's like,
As
that there aren't anything hidden.
in my graphic design background, anytime I would build a logo for somebody and say I would do 10 different versions, chances were so likely that they would choose my least favorite. Jared, have you ever looked at the paper and thought, why did they choose that photo?
No, never.
I can tell by his face that the answer is yes.
Yeah, occasionally. Well, what's interesting is that I'm always interested to see what runs in print versus what runs online.
Because we don't always run the same images of both.
Right, which I like, which is great. So it's always interesting to me to see kind of which one runs where. Like I did a portrait for our backstage section last week of Dwayne from True T Studios, and he kind of my favorite portrait of him was kind of this pose that he had, which ended up online, but not in print. So yeah, it's just always interesting to see, like, I'm always surprised every week too where.
And sometimes those decisions come down to just the fact that newsprint darkens images, and a photo that'll be more vibrant online will lose color in newsprint. And sometimes it's as simple as that, which, in addition to balancing the composition and which ones are our favorite photos, it's which is going to print the best.
Right.
So yeah, there are a lot of things that go into it. I'll say along the lines of what Jared was talking about, wanting your photo subjects to know that you're a part of the community too and you care about them. I'll say that's really the direction that City Paper is going in. We wanted to make it less about us and more about the voices in the community. I'd say that goes towards our illustrations as well. Making sure, like, if we're illustrating a crowd scene, that it's inclusive and representative of the community we serve. I've seen things over the years from people really upset when they see an illustration, not necessarily City Paper, but somewhere else, where the crowd scene is just all white people, and you really have to be conscious of everything that you do and put into your work to make sure it is inclusive, because that's really important to us, really important to the community and the people we serve by doing this job.
Yeah, it can be, and I've seen especially younger photographers who just subconsciously, right, are more comfortable with people who are of their age or whatever. So a lot of times you look at their portfolios sometimes and you see, photos of just 18 to 25-year-olds, and so you have to get out of your comfort zone with that too, and make sure that you're seeing everybody and talking to everybody and photographing people of all ages. And
I know that isn't always necessarily the case if you're photographing for marketing or advertising
Sure.
or a company, because I know that I've had photographers tell me how upset they were that they're shooting an event and the person that hired them told them to only look for pretty young people. It really disturbs me, because advertising, I think, also should not only include pretty young people. It should really be targeted to be inclusive as well. So.
Right. Yeah, but that definitely is. That definitely happens a lot.
So how are your coloring pages going? Jared, you're really working
I
slow.
was focused on talking.
You can't
initially.
multitask. I'm not
No,
good at
I'm
multitasking
terrible.
either.
I mean, I'm a terrible artist anyways, so trying to do two things at once.
So talking about editing photos, sometimes we also edit illustrations. Whenever Abbie hires an illustrator, they'll send us a sketch first, a really rough sketch, and then we'll give changes, and then they'll move to final. Josh has a coloring page open to Lizzie Solomon's artwork of the Permane sandwich, which is an orgy of flavors. Hold it up to the camera. So when I assigned this one out, Abbie and I talked about it, and we're like, oh, a sexy scene would work because it's the marrying of bread and slaw and french fries all in one sandwich, because the fun fact for this page was that the Permane sandwich was born during the Great Depression. In the strip district, the Permane guy wanted to put it all in one thing so workers could grab it on the go and take it with them. So we wanted an illustration that showed the coupling of those ingredients. So when I got this illustration from Abbie,
Lisa said, "Oh wow."
I'm like, that is really sexy. I was fearful that some people would be offended by the original sketch. It was really crazy. Lizzie Solomon's artwork is amazing. I highly recommend you scroll through her Instagram page. She does some wild stuff. And this was one of the wildest I've seen. It was pretty raunchy. We had her edit it down just a little bit. We got this new final artwork, and there was just something about it that was still making me a little queasy, and I love fucked up shit. I would hang the original in my house. I love it. But whenever you're putting together a paper, you have to think we're a free paper. We're in Giant Eagles. We're not targeted to children. We have a sex column in the back. Children do not read it. If they did, they would get enlightened. It's really smart. I recommend it. But parents are the ones picking this up. Adults are reading this, and it's cool. But I don't want to offend people unnecessarily. But after looking at this illustration, I took it into Photoshop, and all I did was remove two tiny little black lines that were indicating a pile of fluid at the bottom of the sandwich, one of them below spread open sandwich legs. And it made all the difference to me. It completely transformed the image to me and made it look super fun. The sex was implied, but it was no longer like as raunchy to me. And I think it really worked. And it was just amazing how two little lines could make a big difference. So
Yeah.
what did you think when you first saw it?
Yeah, I love it. And Lizzie just came out with, I believe, a coloring book of like crazy foods. I just saw it this morning.
Nice.
I want to go and see it. Or similar drawings to this. So it was very fitting that we had her do this, and this is right up their alley. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, there's a lot to look at. There
Yes.
are a lot of it was one of those illustrations that like the more you look at it, the more you see. So yeah, this was actually one of the first that we one of the first illustrations that I feel like we've sort of had to work through like why it doesn't work, why it does work, what, kind of the editing process.
And not to the fault of the artist, just because of the subject matter, which was our concept.
Yeah, I believe, the pitch. One, I had said, we could do this, or this, and this prompt was just like a sex pile sandwich, and this is what she did. Which was exactly, Yeah,
that's pretty much what it is. So the concept of that is all Miss Abbie here.
Yeah, it helps to just be able to think of the craziest thing, and it's a lot of fun to see it
Come to life.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So you hired 4 other artists for this issue too. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, and we can kind of flip through. So yeah, the idea for this issue is that we would talk to people about we would illustrate fun facts about Pittsburgh. So you had already mentioned Abbie Winkler, Abbie's a really great designer. She also works as an illustrator for Giant Eagle. So if you go into, I believe, the Shady Side Market, I think that's where she is, you can see all of her. She has really great hand lettering, illustrations of food, and she illustrated Rosie the Riveter for us, the Pittsburgh version, with like a Steelers bandana and a 412 pin on her shirt collar. And then we had Jerome Charles illustrate.
You probably know this artist as Chew.
Yes.
A local graffiti artist.
Yeah, can see that. Yeah, one of the things that I love about this job is I finally have a reason to email people that I've been like following for years. Yeah, for years. I went back and found it the other day. I would always look for his sign because he would tag things with Chew. I would take pictures of it. I didn't tell him any of this, but yeah, so it was super, super fun to meet him over email and work with him on this assignment. So he illustrated Pittsburgh, and I think still officially is actually just spelled with a G, like on official documents.
No.
But I read it somewhere, yeah. In some places, it's spelled just with a G and not GH, and it's one of the very few cities that has it this way. But it officially dropped the H in 1891. So he illustrated this detective beaver trying to find Pittsburgh's missing H, and so there's like a missing sign. Last seen in 1891.
No, they only dropped it for a couple of years, though, right?
20.
20 years? Was it that long? Okay.
Yeah, you should read our issue, Jared.
Yeah, in 1911, the H was returned.
Okay.
But I think I read somewhere, it doesn't mean that's true, but I read somewhere on the internet that there's still like some official documents
You gotta fact check those
that
things.
I know.
Abbie.
Yeah, didn't do it.
So while you're looking for the next one, Jared, can you tell us a fun fact that no one else knows about you?
About me?
Yeah. Surprise me.
Surprise you? Not much is gonna surprise you. Oh man. I mean, most people. I don't know. I play soccer 4 times a week.
That's not very surprising.
Well, not to you, it's not. No, I don't think most people know that.
Jared shoots a lot of celebrity sports figures. Who was your favorite?
That's the right answer, Jared.
Feeding the
Okay.
answer.
Okay. It's, yeah, I guess no one really cares about
All right.
my soccer skills, right?
Who's the
How do you know?
yeah? Who was your favorite, and who was the biggest pain in the ass? They're
Man.
not listening. Go ahead.
Oh no. My favorite's probably James Conner. Just like a genuinely nice guy. I mean, obviously he's
Feel good local story.
running back for the Steelers. He's from Erie. Went to Pitt. We ended up the first time I photographed him through college, but the first time we met was I did a portrait of him for Players Tribune when just before the NFL draft, and we were trying to think of a place to do it, and I said, why don't we just do it at the practice facility, which is shared by Pitt and the Steelers. So the buildings it's the same building, you go through 2 different doors, but they practice on the same set of fields. And so we did it there, and then it just so happened that, the article came out the next day, right before the draft. It was kind of his letter to NFL GMs, like why you should draft me kind of thing. And then he ended up getting drafted by the Steelers. So he just moved next door, essentially.
But he's also a cancer survivor.
Yep. And and he's been an incredible running back. I mean, he was drafted 4th round, I think. He's one of the NFL's best running backs in my opinion. So, but he always, I always do Steeler portraits every year, and even if he's not on the list of guys we need portraits of, he always comes and says hello, and
Who hires you to do those?
NBC for those. They do photos for their Sunday Night Football programming. So.
And that's probably why I can afford Jared here.
Well, their rate hasn't gone up in 4 years or 5 years I've done it. So, but no, it's fun. It's a nice way again to like get to know those guys before then going and photographing them at practices or at games or at community events. It's nice to just be able to introduce yourself to these people who you're bound to see.
Jared also
numerous
shoots
times.
tennis, and he shoots people like Venus Williams, who was just in Pittsburgh the other week, and
Yeah,
I
randomly.
saw it on Twitter,
Mhm.
and I'm like, Jared, can you get her into the office? Can you meet her? He tweeted at her, no response.
No, not surprised.
So you're
there.
not this hot shit that you think you are, Jared.
I never said that.
I'm just kidding. We love Jared.
But as far, I don't know, the biggest pain in the ass. I mean, it might be Raphael Nadal. I mean, just because every
Whoever
year we
that
always
is.
do portraits of all those people.
Tennis.
So tennis, yep. Yep, he's one of the. I mean, he and Roger Federer are probably the two goats. So, but yeah, he's very particular about things. He's
Does he ask to see his picture?
no, but
A lot
when
of people
he-
do.
Yeah. A lot of people do. It depends too. I did one. We used portraits or Polaroid portraits last year, so we were actually able to show them their portrait there, which was fun. But
I'll mention that the Polaroids that Jared took for the Pirates won him 2 Golden Quill Awards. So,
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
award-winning city paper photographer Jared Wickerham.
Yeah. But yeah, it's he's very particular not only with his while he's playing. He actually has 2 bottles of water. One is water, one has some kind of a mixture of something in it, and they have to be next to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
What is it? What?
Probably booze, right?
And they are always right next to each other. The labels are always facing out, and so he'll take a little sip of one and then put it down and turn it to the label and take the other one, take a sip of that, turn the label. And there was a clip during the U.S. Open where one of the I think one of the ball boys put an extra bottle of water on his chair, and he was like, "What is this?" and like threw it away, you know. But he's very particular. I wanted to do some portraits with the tennis ball, and he was like, I'm not going to use this. This isn't my like preferred tennis ball. You know, it wasn't made by the company that either sponsors him or whatever. And a lot of them will do that, right, where they have a watch sponsor, so they're, you know, very cognizant of like showing off the watch, or, you know. And I get it, because
Speaking
You
of
know
which,
that.
you were really supposed to wear your city paper shirt today on this show.
was I?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're disappointing.
Well,
Yeah.
Patagonia's not a bad
Are
brand
they
either.
sponsored? Yeah,
Yeah.
they're sponsored. Abby, let's talk about the coloring page in front of you right now.
So this one was done by Ziola Jensen. Ziola interned for us last spring. Yeah.
Last
What
fall,
time
I
of
think,
year is it?
right?
I don't
She
even know.
started with.
But she's amazing.
She is super great. I first found her on Instagram and love seeing her sad girls.
Yeah. It's,
She does. When she did a city paper cover
She
for the
did.
health issue. I
Yeah,
believe.
when we focused on seasonal
Mhm.
depression, so
Mhm.
she
Yeah.
a crying girl was on the cover. So,
Yeah. Yeah, she illustrates fantastic people. And for us, she illustrated the smiley face emoticon was actually created here in Pittsburgh by a Carnegie Mellon University computer science professor. And so Ziola inserted it into a Warhol scene of Andy Warhol as with a smiley face and with the Marilyn Monroe portraits. This one we actually had to do a bit of editing as well, because Ziola had emailed me when she started working on it and said, "This looks insanely creepy." It was. And what was funny, what we changed was she had drawn all of the faces with just a regular human jawline and then just like put the smiley face on top of it. And it did kind of look like a face that you just wake up in the middle of the night and just have this like horrific robotic looking person staring at you. And so what I suggested and what ended up working was to turn the the faces into like rounder faces with the, you know, totally round icon that we're all a little bit more used to seeing. And it changed it for me. So it's things like that.
You asked me if I was concerned at all that we were incorporating Andy Warhol into the coloring page, because he doesn't have anything to do with the emoticon. But the thing that we did with all of these was just to make the Pittsburgh fun fact Pittsburghized even more. So it's Andy Warhol is serving as the icon for Pittsburgh in that case,
Yeah.
and it just worked out perfectly.
And then the last one is Maggie Negrete. I believe that's how you say her last name. So Maggie does, I first got to know Maggie at Union Project, where the Pittsburgh Zine Fair, comes every year. So Maggie does a lot of zines and comics. She illustrates fun facts, actually, that have a bit of a social justice twist to them. So definitely follow.
We didn't steal
all
the
of
idea
these
from her.
Yeah.
It just happened that Abbie showed me after I chose the topic that
Yeah.
she did it as well. So
Yeah.
the match was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we were definitely looking for artists who understood, like a line, have a particular line quality, and are able to do really effective art in just black and white lines. So Pittsburgh is the city of bridges, and a lot of people, we have 446 bridges in
Which
the city.
tops Venice, Italy.
Yes. So Maggie illustrated this scene of the bridge monster as people were crossing it.
I see some Pirates fans, so I think it's the
Yeah.
Roberto Clemente Bridge
Mhm.
with a giant tongue
The
and
road is the
monster teeth.
tongue.
Yeah.
And
Pirates
like,
fans probably want to be put out of their misery.
Yeah, that's what it is. If you couldn't hear him, our producer Josh said that the Pirates fans, like himself, want to be put out of their misery.
yeah. So it's a really fantastic illustration as well.
Speaking of Josh, tell us a fun fact about yourself.
I don't know. I can't hear myself. Maybe a little bit. Well, one time I was detained by Homeland Security.
Ah.
way.
Yeah.
Did you forget your driver's license at the airport?
No, but that would be a less interesting. But it was like in the realm of offense. I felt it was pretty similar and asinine. I was living in New York City and I was filming subways with a video camera just for fun because I like them. And somebody called the police and they ended up taking me to a special station, and they called in like Manhattan intelligence community.
Was this after
Ooh.
9/11?
They called Pentagon. Yeah, well, it was 2003.
Okay,
Ah,
yes.
So fair.
But
Yes.
not like
Yeah.
close, but still 3 or 4 years after. You know?
Did you have a shaggy beard?
No, this is my first. I'm not sticking my face in the camera. My first beard experience. So. And I
Fun fact.
I had a tripod. I don't know how many terrorists are carrying around a tripod
Yeah.
to film their targets.
Well, they
but-
have to
What-
be stable video, you
Yeah.
know, it has to be a stable shot.
Yeah.
So
What did you do with the video?
I'm sure I still have it somewhere.
No, but what was the purpose?
Oh, I was just like editing different shots of subways together for fun.
Just, did you have like...
You look as
Like
confused as the
the-
police and
Yes.
the
Like sandwiches.
Still
or the
legal, though.
outside?
Just, like,
oh
put together-
no.
No.
So-
Nice.
I was fully
Wow.
on. What are you doing at
The-
Subway?
I love a good
Seriously?
foot-long sandwich.
Speaking of Jared.
Yes, yeah, oh boy. Yeah.
Oh my. His
And the
second
best part
installment
was-
will be
I'm with you.
McDonald's.
All right.
The
That
people
makes
that
way
they
more
brought in
sense.
didn't know how to use they didn't know how to use the camera to watch what I did, so they
Yeah.
had to ask me how to do it. And if I were really up to something, I would just say no, I don't know how to do it either, and not give you any of the evidence you need.
How did
So,
it end? Did they laugh about
They
it?
drove me home in
Oh, that's-
in a paddy wagon at like 3 in the morning.
Jeez.
Oh.
How long were you there?
It's all started at like 11 p.m.
Oh.
Were you scared?
Oh.
No,
Did you think it was funny?
I
Were
thought
you?
it was kind of funny.
I mean, you're telling the story now, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes way more sense that they would be like, why is this guy trying to figure out like transportation, something
Yeah.
other than like
What
is he-
ingredients do you put into this cold cut trio?
This is our most strategic Subway location. It has
He can't figure out why our cookies are so soft.
all of our
Get a cookie and a
traditions.
drink. What about that bag of chips?
Jared, that makes me think. I know that police have come up to you when you've been recording something. Can you share some examples of that?
Yeah. I mean, the most recent was when I worked on a story that Ryan Dito was writing. We were in Cranberry, and it was a woman who, was essentially a temporary employee of Westinghouse when they were
In China.
in China, and they were building a nuclear plant of some kind. And she was an accountant, and obviously she was there to. Her job was, just to check, money and where things were going when it was being built. But then when it was built, she was no longer needed. But
She lost her job and came to the United States to protest outside Westinghouse headquarters.
She wrote a letter to somebody here.
She wrote a letter to the CEO, I believe,
Yeah.
and I think she got a response of some kind. It might have been a form response.
Yeah.
She interpreted that to mean that she could, if she spoke to the CEO outside Westinghouse headquarters in Cranberry, that she would get her job back. So she protested outside of Westinghouse for 4 weeks.
Yeah, for a month or so. She stayed in a hotel. She had she ate local Chinese food. She got one meal a day. She split it, ate half for lunch, half for dinner. Had some free fruit from the hotel for breakfast, and would walk over every day. And she had one double-sided sign, and so we I went over there a couple times, once with Ryan and then once by myself, and we I just walked with her essentially on the highway, and we walked to the sidewalk right where the entrance is, and they own that whole section of land, and and she had been approached while she was there by herself, but it was totally fine. But now that there was a photographer clearly covering this for a news story, they it's got a little bit more attention, and while I was there, two Chevy Tahoes or Escalades or whatever, kind of blacked out, pull up with their kind of in-house security, and guy in a leather jacket with no identification gets out and starts giving me a hard time and asking me who I am and what I'm doing there.
And you started recording him on your phone,
Yeah,
which is super smart.
Yeah, I just started recording video, and I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, that doesn't matter. I said, well, you're not the police. I don't have to. I'm on a public sidewalk here. There's, and so then he got mad, and he was like, oh, are you taking photos? And I said, no, I'm taking video. And he was like, oh. And so he kind of stepped back at that point, and luckily the real police showed up, and he was understanding and a nice guy, and he said, yep, you're on a public sidewalk. There's nothing they can do. They could, and so luckily they left, but not before, the woman who was essentially there was just hysterical and crying because she, her English isn't great, and she didn't, she has a family back home, and she doesn't want to end up in jail or, do something wrong. And so I assured her that, that we were in a perfectly fine spot. And, but yeah, it wasn't, they still kind of used some intimidation with her. So,
has there ever been a time when you've been on assignment where you felt unsafe?
I mean, you never know. Going back to the Antoine Rose protest, I think you always have to have your head on a swivel. The one guy who essentially tried to run through protesters.
Yeah, you took pictures of the car going through.
Yeah.
Toppling through people.
Yeah,
standing there.
He luckily didn't really badly injure anyone. I think one woman was sort of hit. But that that kind of happened behind me, and the police were right there. It's not like there weren't police around. There was a Pirates game, and they essentially kept the protesters to one side, and of course the police were on the other side of where this car was coming from. And you always have to have your head on a swivel and just be ready for anything to happen. So. I think if you assume that you're always safe, then that's the wrong way to approach it. I mean, you want to hope that everybody's going to be peaceful and do the right thing, but not everybody does. So.
So we talked about some difficult things. Can you think of one thing that you shot for us that was really exciting? I mean,
I always tell people, like, I think it's really I think it's awesome in general when anybody truly appreciates your coverage and you being there and photographing the event and just I feel like a lot of times I'm the representative for us, whoever's writing the story, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't always meet in person. It might be over phone or email or what have you. So if they haven't met that writer before, I'm the only person that they've met. So it's nice to, I think, I get to hear all of the good things a lot of times.
Jared also helps us. As a photographer, he's a visual journalist. He does photo captions. He also is able to write, but he'll also often get quotes from people because he has conversations with the people he shoots, and that often ends up in the story. So you help us out.
Yeah, well, yesterday, again, just having a conversation with these people, understand, and they were the ones that told me, oh, well, the DA was just given an award for, it was essentially, he was given an award for helping female victims of abuse, which was, considering everything that happened and the fact that, with, at the gas station and those men not really getting harsh charges put against them.
Yeah, we have a piece up on our website, more on this if you're interested at pghcitypaper.com.
Yeah. And so I called Ryan and let him know that fact because he just got the award yesterday, essentially while they were protesting. So yeah, it's nice to get in and get to know these people for those reasons. But yeah, I think anytime anyone is appreciative of you being there, and I think just I've never felt more a part of Pittsburgh than I have since working for City Paper. I get to go to these new restaurants and try out all kinds of food and meet these interesting people, especially for our backstage portraits and that kind of thing. So it's nice. It's and a lot of these people do various jobs and they change jobs, and so they end up all over the place. So yeah, it's nice to you just really start feeling a part of the community more so than ever. It really expands just your knowledge of people in the city, and I think that's my favorite part.
I think the care that you put into your work shows. It's really a pleasure to open up the photos and feel the emotions of these people coming through your artwork and documentation. It's really lovely.
Well,
So
thanks.
I very much appreciate you.
Well, thanks for making my photos look pretty at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The end of the week. And not getting mad at me for bringing them in late on
Well,
occasion.
Jared showed up this morning and said, I think this is the earliest I've ever come into the office. And I said, this is awesome. You can turn your photos in on time today. And he said, I forgot my laptop. So,
Forgot.
yeah, forgot. I'm going to just have Abbie start calling you and swearing at you and putting pressure on you.
Yeah.
But that's the thing I found with photographers. They're not always timely.
No.
No.
Well, yeah.
We have to be so on time to get the photo, to get the right photo. They're worn out. They got to take some self-care.
Thank you.
and
Go
be-
back to
Thank you.
Subway, Josh.
That's it.
We're going to take some pictures of the subway. Cold cut tree.
There's a Subway right across the street. I should send you over for a photo essay, Josh. Abbie, tell me about the most fun you had illustrating something for City Paper. Was it the fun facts this week, or was it something else? You've done a few.
Yeah, the one that's coming to mind this was a few months ago. I illustrated Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That
Mm.
was a
That's
really
great.
fun one. Because there was a convention being put on by who? I don't
It was in Butler County.
Yeah.
So it was worth the drive. It was something we thought worth covering because it was so bizarre.
And it was like, the tagline of the event was like, Bigfoot, UFOs, and the unexplained. Like, that's what the convention was about. So Yeah, I did an illustration of Bigfoot off on the side of the road trying to catch a ride. This like little ghost and like a little vintage car was coming down the road, and he was hitchhiking, and there was UFOs in the sky and a big moon, and
Every time
That was
Abbie
a lot
does
of
an
fun.
illustration, all of us come to her desk and, ooh, did you see it? Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably been my favorite piece of 2019 so far.
For this week's issue, the fun facts, when you were researching, was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, so we had, gotten a handful of fun facts from Pittsburgh, so I read through those and then I found a few more. I think my favorite one that I came across, and I put this in the cover because it was so great. I illustrated a barrel of whiskey with whiskey pouring out into 2 cups because I read a fun fact that in 1808, Allegheny County had produced enough whiskey for every man, child, and woman in America to have a barrel and a half,
Damn.
which
Wow.
was insane.
Did it make you go home and drink?
Yeah.
No, I lost it.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun. I've done some work for Wiggle Whiskey. I mean, to have like whiskey go away and then come back and see that history.
So is
Yeah, I
it
mean,
Wiggle
yeah.
or Waggle?
Well, so the man, I believe, they say Wiggle, the company here in Pittsburgh, but it's named after a person named Weigel or Weigel, I believe, was a part of the Whiskey Rebellion, and so that's what their name is a nod to.
Another Pittsburgh fun fact.
Another Pittsburgh fun fact, yeah. Another fun fact that I read was I put a little incline in here, and we all know that there's 2 operating inclines, but at one point in the city there were like over 15 inclines going up and down the hills of Pittsburgh.
Wow.
I've read that there was one in Northside somewhere. I can't remember where the rest of them were.
Yeah.
Like, were they tiny? They had to have
I
been some
don't know.
tiny.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. But I would love to go back and just see all of those.
It'd be cool if like some of those cars still existed.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
somewhere in a
We should find
probably in
it.
a
I
garage
imagine
somewhere.
some of them, like I wonder how many like deaths were attributed to incline, like
I bet they're
I don't
like,
know.
they've been turned into dining cars and like $700,000 Sewickley houses.
Mhm,
So.
mhm. There's
Tiny
probably one or
houses.
two that are still hidden somewhere in some storage facility or.
Huh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to see those.
So I almost made a mistake that went into the issue. Luckily, our managing editor, Alex Gordon, caught my error and fixed it, but I was
I thought
writing
you were
the...
perfect.
No, I am definitely not perfect.
Fooled me.
I included in the intro that Pittsburgh won more Super Bowls than anyone else. And Alex told me
Tied
that
now.
they're actually tied now.
Mhm.
I
That's
even...
Because that dirtball's from Boston. That's how he knows.
No, I lived
Right.
in Boston. Yeah.
Oh, no,
No,
Alex.
Oh, Alex.
Alex.
Yes,
Alex.
yes, yes. Yeah. Right.
That's how he knows.
Yeah.
You,
So,
could feel, you could feel the tingle. It's like, no, this
But
can't
the
be
thing
right.
is, this shows how important fact checking is. And I swear to God, after I saw this info, I Googled it. I looked at multiple articles that said Pittsburgh won more Super Bowls than anyone else. But I apparently was looking at updated ones because, it is true that they have more Super Bowls, but they're tied, so.
Well, and if you ask a lot of Steelers fans, they'll probably just say that the Patriots cheated and it doesn't count. So
Yes,
yeah, it's,
right.
yeah.
So
So is this
I was
as
right.
of like last year?
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So it still makes sense in the issue. We're still number 1. We're just tied for number 1.
They were the first 6.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first to 6.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jared.
Sure. I got you. Man, my coloring skills have not improved since college. Like, I'm pretty sure I failed color theory, and now I see why.
I was gonna say, were you doing a lot of coloring and?
Yeah, it's
In college?
Yeah.
I
was-
That's his
I
baseline.
guess, I
That was
mean,
my baseline.
that's probably when the coloring book craze started to hit. I don't know.
So before the coloring issue, I gave everyone in the office a page from a coloring book my mom, happy birthday mom, sent me. It's a bunch of pages of cat swearing. I picked out special ones for everybody. I won't repeat what they all are, but
I mean,
adult coloring books have really become a huge craze. I thought they would die down, but they're still out there. And I believe that will be in Market Square this Saturday for a coloring event where you can come down to Market Square and pick up a copy of the issue and color the pages. We also, in addition to the full pages by local artists, we have 3 of our production members, Kevin Shepard, our Director of Operations, Jeff Schreckengoss, and Josie Norton, also illustrated bonus coloring pages in the issue. Jeff's is really fun. Fun fact, the Mr. Yuck sticker came from Pittsburgh. I was a huge fan of Mr. Yuck. We had that on all of our containers under the sink growing up. I think a year ago I brought up Mr. Yuck and half of the staff had no idea what I was talking about because I work with a bunch of fucking millennials. But yes, Jared and Abbie, if you didn't know, Mr. Yuck was a green circular
I'm aware, yeah.
For some reason, we had numerous sheets of those as a child, and I had a sticker book, and I just lined like 3 pages straight with Mr. Yuck stickers, different sizes, because kids just like to stick stickers to things, and I was dumb.
Yeah, I don't think you probably didn't pay attention to what those stickers were telling you not to do, right?
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of
shows.
household cleaners ingested.
There's a lot of stuff still in my system from those days.
Yeah, so what other ones did they do? Josie did the Big Mac being constructed. The Big Mac was made in southwestern Pennsylvania. There's a Big Mac museum. We included that fact in our city guide, which is still available online. And then Kevin did
The Ferris wheel.
Ferris wheel. There used to be a Ferris wheel at the Point. They now bring it back whenever they have a regatta, which they did not this year. He illustrated some of Mr. Rogers and his puppets on the Ferris wheel. That was built by a Pittsburgher, the first steel Ferris wheel, I believe.
Ferris, I believe, was his name, I think.
Whatever.
We don't.
Oh,
It's a beautiful illustration.
Okay.
It's in the paper. Just read it. All right. We're about wrapped up here. Before I end, I want to let everyone know that just yesterday marked my first year anniversary as editor. I want to thank everyone for reading and thank the staff. I've never worked with such a great group of people, and I really appreciate all of you. So
We
thanks.
appreciate you.
Pick us up. We've been putting more online content throughout the week. We have a website redesign coming soon, soft launching, but I'm really excited about it. Wait till you see the mobile site. It's so much easier to read, so we're pumped about that, and Josh is to thank for that. So thanks. Lynn Cullen will be off on Monday, but tune back in to hear her show on Tuesday.